On May 25th, 1969, Jimi Hendrix played the San Jose Folk Rock Festival. And the day before, the Oakland Tribune did an article about Jimi Hendrix because he wasn't really a household name yet at that point. This is actually 3 months before Woodstock. And so if you're into Jimi Hendrix or you like the music from that period, I think you're going to really like this newspaper article about Jimi Hendrix. So the article is called, the title is The Solid Gold Experience. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. Whatever it is within the purple haze of musical excitement that has cast an uncontrollable spell over thousands of fans worldwide, Jimi Hendrix has made his experience into the biggest selling product on the American rock scene. Behind the 3 gold record albums and the 2 gold singles, the Jimi Hendrix Experience presents a realistic example of the immense business that rock music is today. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, here we are 55 years later, and the Beatles at this point had only been on the scene, it came to America like 5 years before this. And so the big business of music was relatively young at the time. So I think that's why they're saying that. Look, this is an immense business that's going on, and Jimi Hendrix is an example of this. Less than 2 years ago, the Experience was a support act touring with the Monkees. Remember them? And playing second bill to Jefferson Airplane at the old Fillmore Auditorium. Tomorrow at the San Jose Folk Rock Festival, Hendrix will be the star attraction and is expected to lure over 20,000 people for that day alone. As the supreme proof of Hendrix's mass popularity, he recently completed 22 one-night sellout concerts cross-country, including the Oakland Coliseum complex last month. Like the late Otis Redding, whose many talents were only recognized in Europe while he was alive, the Seattle-born Hendrix had to go to England before he could get started with his career. That's actually just an interesting side note. That's what happened. I mean, he actually went over to England, and what was interesting, when he went over there and started playing, it was a lot of the famous rock stars at the time. I mean, you hear stories about people like John Lennon and Paul McCartney and Pete Townsend and others going and seeing Jimi Hendrix play. And he had this huge impact on them. And then, of course, he came back to America and just became this, monster, legendary rock star. Let's see here. After Michael Jeffrey, former manager of the Animals, discovered Hendrix playing at a small cafe in Greenwich Village's MacDougall Street in 1966, he persuaded Jimi to come to England and form his own group. With his 2 English partners in the Experience, drummer Mitch Mitchell and bassist guitarist Noel Redding, Hendrix played the big concert halls in Europe and, in the words of their official press biography, were an overnight success. Despite their success on the European pop charts and concerts, it wasn't until the Monterey International Pop Festival in August of 1967 that the American public heard of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The current film Monterey Pop shows Hendrix playing his guitar with his teeth, smashing his guitar at the finale of the tune Wild Thing, and demonstrating to the rock world a new form of psychedelic music that had previously not been experienced. Later that summer, the group released Purple Haze, a song written by Jimi, and their first album, Are You Experienced? The latter recording was Billboard's biggest selling album for 1968 and earned Hendrix the Trade magazine's coveted award of Artist of the Year. Now, I'm curious, those of you watching this video that like Jimi Hendrix, what was the first thing you heard from Jimi Hendrix? For me, it was Purple Haze. My parents had an 8-track tape player and a bunch of 8-track tapes, and one of them was I don't know what it was. It was some sort of a best of thing that just had all these hit songs from all these different bands. And it had the Grateful Dead on there. I think the song Truckin' had Alice Cooper, School's Out. And it also had Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze. And I remember putting that 8-track in and listening to that. And it just blew me away. It was so cool. And this is what, 14, 15 years later when I hear this. And anyway, after he put it out, that is. And anyway, just amazing stuff. So what was the first Hendrix song you heard? Since then, Hendrix's status has skyrocketed to the point that he now receives over $20,000 for one performance. This has been achieved despite the fact that Hendrix has not performed on television, even though he has been offered over $50,000 for an appearance. Promoter Bill Graham recently said that rock music has been taken away from the people on a sweat level and put in these monster coliseums where they freeze oceans and put chairs up miles away somewhere. The experience comes to this writer's mind as a perfect example of what Graham means. And it is kind of interesting. I'd also like to get your feedback on this. One of my favorite ways to see a concert is really intimate venues. I mean, the first concerts I went to, they were in big arenas and things like that. But man, I really do. I think there's something about being able to be much more intimate. And then when you started moving into this time, especially, the Beatles, you hear those stories of them playing in these stadiums and you couldn't hear them and that kind of thing. But that's where music went. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're playing these huge places. And I don't know if that's always been a good thing. While Hendrix is currently trying to make a new album, the records have been few and not up to the high quality of the first album. Even though Hendrix has improved his vocals and written more songs, the experience seems to lack the enthusiasm which made Foxy Lady and their earlier tunes into stimulating sounds. A temporary departure for the group may soon come about to refreshen their individual show business desires and hopefully their music. Noel Redding has been playing sets on the tour with his new group, The Fat Mattress, aside from his work with The Experience, and would like to have the time to get the Mattresses' first album completed. Mitch would probably play, scrolling to the top, on some recordings of his friends to keep busy. Hendrix, who has a strong desire to become an actor, according to his agents, is seriously considering a role in a Western to be made in Italy soon. Am I just totally clueless that I didn't know that? This is, when I read this article, that was actually the first time I'd heard of this idea that Jimi Hendrix really had this strong desire to become an actor. Anyway, kind of fascinating to me. At his recent Oakland concert, Hendrix displayed the showmanship of a superstar. Though Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, and the Airplanes, Jack Cassidy and Jorma Kaukonen, all of whom appeared at Winterland last month. By the way, those last two, when it says Airplane, that's Jefferson Airplane. Maybe better guitar players, Hendrix is the performer. That is such an interesting thing to hear now. Nothing against Jerry Garcia, great guitar player. Same with Jimmy Page. Jorma Kaukonen, I don't know how you say his last name. I think Jack Cassidy was a bass player for Jefferson Airplane, wasn't he? But Jorma was a really, really excellent, exceptional guitar player. But I don't think any of those guys even touch, in my opinion, Jimi Hendrix. So just interesting. Again, here we are in 1969, and this is just one person's, writing this article. So, but they do make the point that he's a showman, and you watch anything by Jimi Hendrix, and he is just a mesmerizing figure. I mean, from the clothes that he's wearing, which were just always kind of, wild, to the way he threw his guitar around, the way he played it. Because the guitar, when Jimi Hendrix played it, you'll hear it described by some people saying it looked like it was just part of his body. And it really did. I mean, the way he moved with that thing. And then, oh my goodness, when you'd see the shots of him with because he always played a Fender Strat. And it was a right-handed Fender Strat that he flipped over and just played left-handed. But those shots of him when he has it on fire on the ground and he's doing that thing that looks like this weird ritual, man, he was so cool, so interesting to watch. Dressed in jeans, a green shirt, and a bright collage of scarves tied around his clothing, Hendrix used his guitar as an object of affection. Hugging, squatting down with his instrument held tightly against his chest, Hendrix mesmerizes his audience into feeling themselves through his guitar. The words then became irrelevant. At one point, Hendrix forgot the lyrics to the Cream's Sunshine of Your Love. but his guitar spoke Jimmy's admiration for the song and its artists. In retrospect, Hendrix played so loudly that all his songs became entangled with his overpowering music. And that's pretty interesting because Jimi Hendrix, although he did have his own music, I mean, he played that. He was really well known for playing Sgt. Pepper's. Of course, he played Wild Thing. So he did a lot of other people's music too. Okay, perhaps since he frequently chooses not to talk to the press, Jimmy's thoughts on current events are unknown. Hendrix did say before he played a psychedelic version of the Star-Spangled Banner that the lyrics need to be updated. Critics of Jose Feliciano's version may once again rise to protect the faith. And by the way, again, keep in mind, this is 3 months before Woodstock, and that is the place where he really put that Star-Spangled Banner thing on the map. I mean, how many of us that are into music, that study this stuff, have seen that video? Jimi Hendrix playing the Star-Spangled Banner on the guitar at Woodstock. I mean, he just did something, and so many people after that, that'd be one of the things. I remember when I first started learning how to play the guitar, you knew that Jimi Hendrix had played the Star-Spangled Banner, and you just kind of learned how to play it. Anyway, it was so cool what he did with that. The Coliseum concert proved one thing. Jimi Hendrix does what he wants on stage and off. Grooving with his music and really into himself, Jimmy played nearly twice as long as usual. The finale, a 25-minute version of Voodoo Child with Jack Cassidy of the Jefferson Airplane on bass. Okay, yeah, that's what I was saying a second ago. Jack Cassidy's bass player. Was a fantastic display of the best of Hendrix and his experience. That's so cool. The whole idea of 25-minute Voodoo Child. Voodoo Child, if you're not familiar with it, it's this really, really simple, and it's this really simple plodding tune, but the soloing that he would do over the top of that was just, it's those things that make people go, this guy was one of the greatest guitarists that ever lived, because he had such command over not just the guitar, but the electric guitar. He did so many things with it. He took advantage of all the things you could do with that instrument. And it was just so powerful. Okay. During this time, the large crowd pressed forward toward the stage. A few who attempted to get on stage were quickly thrown off by Hendrix's manager and friends. In a forceful effort to get Hendrix to stop playing so airplane departures could be met, his manager went on stage and told every member of the experience of their important schedule. It's pretty funny. It sounds like they got to catch a plane, and they just keep playing. And the manager has to go up there and say, hey guys, time to shut her down. Okay. Hendrix was too engrossed in his musical mastery to be interrupted. It is doubtful that he even heard his manager's plea. The result was a concert well worth remembering, and it worked towards the theory that musicians' primary concern is their music and their listeners' appreciation, not the money. The impression remains, although Jimi Hendrix and his experience jet off to another city of 10,000 fans and 20 grand quickly and silently. And that's the end of the article. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that fascinating? Listen to what people were saying back then. And this is, like I said, this is before Woodstock. He was not the household name that he is today. And anyway, I'd love to get your feedback. If you happen to ever see him in concert, I know we have people that watch these shows that we do here that are old enough to have been there. I would love to hear about that. And also leave any other feedback. If you remember the first Jimi Hendrix song you heard, if you were a fan, if you weren't a fan, love to hear your feedback about all that stuff. And of course, follow the channel, like the video, and as always, have yourself a fantastic day.